James Grossi back in the Sun newsroom. We might have to start calling this podcast the Kurt Larson featuring James Grossi podcast soon. How would you feel about that?
That sounds pretty good to me. I'm not against that necessarily.
Well, what's the vibe you're getting here?
It's hot.
You know how it's hot in this room with
hot.
the lights on, and
Yeah.
you know, I have my own style here. What's the Sun newsroom like?
It's a little bit sleepy on the afternoons every time I've been over here, but it's very nice.
We're trying to raise the level. Let's get into this, the podcast this week, heading into the game against LA. Some news out of training on Wednesday that Josie Altidore won't travel to LA for the big game against the Galaxy. Sebastian Giovinco won't travel to LA. Should we be concerned this late in the season with guys missing games? What do you think?
No, it doesn't really concern me at all. If they weren't particularly injured at this point, given the lead that Toronto has in the Supporters' Shield race and atop the Eastern Conference, the argument could be made that this is something Greg would be looking to do anyways. So if they have to miss a game, if they have to miss 2 games, it's hardly the worst thing that could happen.
You also got to look at these injuries kind of individually. Giovinco comes out at halftime against San Jose. Probably a little bit more concerned with him, given that they've kind of identified it as a quadriceps issue, which he struggled with before. They don't think it's going to be anything long term. With Josie, I think it's more having to do with rest. I talked to his, you can call them people, after the game, and they kind of just said that he wasn't injured despite kind of limping when he came off the field. I think with him it's more of a rest thing, and he probably could be back for the Montreal game. Is that what you're getting?
Yeah, I think the key word on all of this was precautionary. This is a situation where both players were sort of feeling, Josie's been flying all over the place, playing a ton of matches, and Giovinco, it's been a long year for him too. So, especially when we look at what happened last year where Seba sort of ran out of gas and wasn't quite able to be himself come the playoffs, giving him a chance to rest up before the meat of the season doesn't seem like a bad idea.
So who steps up in his place? We got guys like Ben Spencer, Tosan Ricketts. We've heard from him occasionally this season. Jordan Hamilton's been doing well with TFC2. So what do we expect to see when we go down there? Do we expect to see a 4-5-1? Do they stay with the 3-5-2? What do you think?
When it comes to formation, I think the 2 possible options are the 3-5-2 with, maybe Ricketts and Hamilton up top, or we might see Greg go back to that diamond midfield that he sort of tried out against Philadelphia there with Osorio playing at the top of the midfield sort of thing. As far as the striking options go, this is the time of year where, come the playoffs, we've seen a lot this year between Josie and Seba that both the opposition tends to focus on them a little bit more than maybe they have in past seasons, and so both of them have seen their production sort of drop a little bit. But it's the rest of the guys stepping up, and so you want to have everybody firing on all cylinders when you reach this time of year.
It's also one of the talking points all year for this team has been its depth. So this is maybe one last time. You'd think probably one last time where they're going to go on the road cross country and see if they can get a result without their 2 leading scorers. They've done it before, at least without one or the other. There's no concern heading into the playoffs that either of these guys are going to be gone, is there?
Well, that's always in the back of your mind in the sense that
this is trying to prevent that.
Yes, exactly. This is precautionary, as I said, to make sure that they are available when they're needed most. But at the same time, unexpected things happen, and you want to have everybody available.
Is it selfish of me that I'm a little bit upset because I want to see TFC go for this record so much? I want to see how good they can be. I've been saying this all season, and I'm not a fan of this team. I just want to see how good they can actually be by the end of the year. Is that if you're a fan, is that selfish thinking?
No, I think everybody is very curious on how good this team actually can be. I think we've seen matches where they are incredibly dominant, but we've also seen spells where they haven't been at their best. And I think if you were to talk to Greg or if you were to talk to Michael, they look at every training session, every match as a chance to be better. Greg had this phrase that he's been using called the best version of themselves.
Yeah.
It's something he said over and over again, and
trust the process.
They're striving for this.
It's one of those. It's like coach speak, right?
Oh no, it very much is. But at the same time, it does say that this is a team that's not particularly satisfied with what they've achieved so far, and they are striving to be better every single day.
The interesting part about going back to the record I talked about, I wrote a column in the Sun on Monday that kind of received some mixed reviews. I think more people disagreed with it than agreed with it,
That happens sometimes.
which is okay. Maybe some people read it the wrong way or took it the wrong way. Anyway, it was about, if TFC, let's say they go to LA, let's say they get a win in LA, let's say they beat Montreal midweek, let's say they're well on their way to 70 points and they're going to get that record. The column I wrote was about how if they get that record and still manage to somehow lose MLS Cup, that the season isn't lost. And I gave a bunch of reasons why that we can talk about, but if TFC gets to an MLS Cup and loses it at BMO Field again in front of whatever 38,000 fans and millions of viewers on TSN, is the season lost?
This individual season, it's a perspective thing in the sense that, do you judge a team on a calendar year or do you judge them on the entirety of their process?
That's what I want you to judge right now.
The entire season? Well, I mean, it's in a way, it's a bit of a cop out because it's both. You're judging both the progression of the club from season to season, as well as this individual year. If we go back to 2015, it didn't end the way that they wanted to, but the fact that they made the playoffs when they got over that hurdle meant that season was a success to some degree.
What I would say is that this season will not be viewed as a success if they don't win MLS Cup by a majority of people in this city. But the point I was trying to make is that in sports, I believe that if you can do something that no other team has done, let's say you get a record that stands the test of time, that people are still trying to beat 30 years from now when, maybe TFC has multiple championships anyway, people are still talking about that season. I think that that's almost as big as winning an MLS Cup when you look back on it. Now then, you need to win an MLS Cup because it'll change the perception in the city. But am I wrong for thinking that in the future, one might be more valuable than the other?
Well, we have record books for a reason, and the reason is because we love to do these comparisons year over year, and anytime you can establish yourself as somebody who's worthy of that recognition, it is a valuable thing in and of itself.
Why it does matter that they win an MLS Cup? Because all those people that tuned in for the playoffs last year and watched TFC lose in a shootout, it ended there for them. They haven't still been following as closely all season. I think if you win an MLS Cup in this city and you bring a championship here, which hasn't been done in a couple of decades, in terms of the major sports, we won't really talk about the Argos, but if you can do that, then it just tilts things further in that direction of TFC going full mainstream. That said, like I said, I'm selfish, and I think in the future I'm going to be talking about what the team's accomplished in the regular season more than if they win an MLS Cup.
Yeah, I mean, I guess what I would say is that I don't necessarily look at championships as the defining thing for me. I've sat through 10 years watching this club not be particularly great, and the amount of entertainment and the number of memories that we've gotten from this last 2 or 3 years has been invaluable in terms of building that fan culture, in terms of laying down a foundation for the side. So if you don't win the trophy, maybe you don't get all the recognition that you deserve, but I think they've done a lot of that already.
I took a poll on Twitter. Scientific, hey, it's to say, hey, I have a passionate fan base on Twitter. I took a poll of, it was basically, would you rather have the record, an incredible season, or would you rather win an MLS Cup? Guess how many people said they would forego an MLS Cup in order to have that record?
Twitter strikes me as a pretty now sort of place, so I would say most people wanted the record.
No, 25%.
Oh, really?
Which I thought was still extremely high, and I think kind of points to my, there's some people thinking out there that this record's special, and they wouldn't give up this season and what's been witnessed down at the BMO Field for an MLS Cup. At least 25% of people, which I thought was interesting. The chance to watch, great players perform at a high level, which kind of brings me to my next conversation, which is the MVP race. Someone from TFC needs to be in the MVP race, I think. They're the best team in the league, the best team ever. Someone has to be in. The question is who. Everybody's talking about a few players for MVP. Where's your thinking right now on the MVP race?
You know, it's difficult. If you're going by a pure number sort of situation, you know,
Which people usually do.
well, it's the nature of the award that, you know, if you're looking for an individual who has risen their head above the rest of the pack, goals and assists tend to be a pretty good way of establishing that. You know, you have
I
to
disagree
look
with that, but keep going.
you have to look at Diego Valeri. You have to look at you know, what David Villa has done in New York. Both are putting up serious numbers, and they're doing it with teams that aren't of the caliber of Toronto FC. At least not yet, as they're proving themselves. I think one of the things that all three Toronto players who are in this, or maybe even all four, depending on who you want to look at.
Who are the four?
Who are the four in
Who are the
Toronto?
four? Yeah.
Michael Bradley, Josie Altidore, Sebastian Jovinko, and I think Victor Vasquez.
So the DP level players. Yeah.
There's a reason.
Yeah, fair enough. But what is the MVP? Because that's the next question is...
That is the question.
How are you going, like, Diego Valeri on Portland, that's fine, but you look at his stats, I think he has 17 goals this year, fine, you know, on an average team, a team that got blown out when they came to BMO Field. David Villa, great player, he's injured. What if he doesn't play that many more games this season due to injury? We don't know yet. Then who steps up? I mean, who in your eyes steps up, and then and then why? What is that MVP conversation for you?
For me, the MVP has always been. I've always found it a little bit weird that we go just on raw stats because I don't know if you can be the most valuable player if your team doesn't succeed. You know, otherwise we should be having conversations about a goalie who makes a million saves in a season because their team just isn't very good. He's clearly had a major impact for his side, but he doesn't have many goals to his name. You know, if you want to look at it as more of a holistic thing, whereby a player has to be achieving something with his team in order to earn the recognition, then I don't think you can look past Toronto FC in terms of what they've accomplished this year.
I think the MVP for me is if you take that person out of the team, that team becomes very much less than what they were. So you can make that argument for a lot of players in the league. You know, you can make that argument for Villa. He has to be in the MVP conversation. You can make that argument for Valeri. He's in it. That's fine. For me, on Toronto right now, it's between... I think it's between a couple of guys. Josie Altidore, I think, has to be in that conversation. And I think Victor Vasquez has to be in that conversation. Josie Altidore, for me, and I've kind of changed on this recently, I think he's the most important striker on that team, which says a lot. And I think if you watch what he did during last year's MLS Cup, in that game against Montreal, he took the team on his shoulders and didn't get as much credit for it as he deserved. So right now, I think Josie Altidore might even be my number 3 in that conversation. If you had to pick a number 3 right now to go along with Villa and Valeri, who do you think it would be? It doesn't have to be on Toronto, but you have to give someone. Yeah. I think it has to go to a Toronto player.
I'm going to go with Vasquez just because I think he's sort of been the straw that stirred Toronto's drink this year. You know, between the number of assists, and I just saw the other day that he has 6 game-winning assists, which is just sort of talk about being up for the right moment at the right time. I think you have to have him in that conversation because he took a team that was very good and he made them infinitely better, and that's almost as challenging as it might even be more challenging than taking a bad team and making them passable.
What about this argument that TFC has too many good players and none of them stand up?
Oh, that's always a difficulty, you know, is that how do you pick one guy who is responsible? You know, the MVP race sometimes comes down to, as you were saying, which player, if subtracted from their team, has the largest impact in terms of what is lost. But when you have a team that's as good as this and has as many guys stepping up and performing, how do you know how much of each player's contribution is responsible for any of the success?
Well, it's got them to where they are, which is top of the Supporters' Shield standings, which means they're going to host MLS Cup. There's some chatter right now out there, and it's some interesting chatter about how intriguing a possible TFC versus Vancouver Whitecaps MLS Cup would be. Nobody's really talking that much about the West because there aren't that many good teams in the West. I think, like Greg Vanny told me last week, he thinks that the top 5 teams in the Supporter Shield standings could all be from the Eastern Conference, which I think is fair when you look at the discrepancy in points. Vancouver, I think they're second or third right now in the West. Nobody's really talking about them. No big names. They're not the most exciting team to watch. Their record is, slightly above 500, but they're doing well in the West. How big would that be for... What do you think of that matchup? And then just overall, how big would that be for this country?
In terms of what it would be for Canada, I'll take the second part of that first. It would be a very interesting day for Canada. Canadian soccer's come a long way in the years that MLS has been in the country, and for all that the clubs have achieved individual in terms of growing themselves up and growing a fan base and growing the sport in the country, we haven't really seen that sort of success replicated in trophies or in playoff berths or in just on-field success.
It would be horrible for the U.S.
That's the counterpoint.
Not that anybody should care, right?
Well, it comes down to, every year we have this conversation, is it New York, is it LA, are the big markets going to make it to the MLS Cup so that people are tuned in? I don't know if you could think of, except maybe that, what was it, Colorado, Salt Lake, Colorado, Dallas was the one a couple of years ago. That was
horrible.
It was fun. I froze myself off in the stands, but I did that last year as well, too.
Yeah.
So, I think it would be a bit of a nightmare for the league, but at the same time, that's a huge step forward in terms of progress for the Canadian sides.
I also kind of think that if Vancouver came into BMO Field, an outdoor game against that team, the way it's playing right now, I also think it could be one of the most lopsided games in MLS Cup history. I mean, I look at their roster, I like some of their players. Yorni Reyna, I like him, they're fine, these pieces. Freddie Montero, he can be dangerous at time. Nowhere near as dangerous as he was 5-6 years ago.
You forgot to mention Alphonso Davies. But Carl Robb, it's so weird how they use him out there. Do they think he's ready? Do they not think he's ready? I think that's a team that could come in here and get blown out. So I think that would also be a talking point, is how close would that final even be? Well, the one thing that would be in Vancouver's favor is we've seen a lot of times it's not necessarily the best team that comes out and wins MLS Cup. It's all about getting hot at the right time and building that momentum. And you look at Vancouver, I think they're unbeaten in 4. They got 1 loss in their last 7 or something.
We're going to bring stats out now.
Yeah,
You want to bring some stats out? I got some stats for you.
All right, bring them out.
So Vancouver is, I think, 4 points out of first in the West.
Okay.
And 5 points out of being out of the playoffs. That's how crazy the West is now. That's kind of how average the team is.
It is, but along with that sort of hitting form at the right time, sometimes being in a battle and having to scrap for everything. Like TFC is going to coast. Well,
yeah.
Presumably they're going to coast to top of the East, whereas a team that's sort of battle tested and honed from the challenge that they're going to face over these next 2 weeks could be something that gives them a little bit of an advantage.
There's also that argument that when you have let's call it kind of a derby, an all-Canadian thing, there's also the argument that everything goes out the window when it's 2 Canadian teams playing in who knows what could be snow at BMO Field. So like you said, all things could be equal. And
given the way that past MLS Cups have gone, for a former TFC player to come into Toronto and prove an upset would not be unheard of.
Just talking a little bit more league-wide right now. Video review. There have been, I think, many more success stories with video review than there have been negatives. We haven't seen it a lot at BMO Field, but what do you think? A few weeks into this, was it a month into this now? There haven't been that many issues. I think people thought this was going to go a lot differently and a lot worse than it has.
I think nobody really read exactly how it was going to be used and the sort of limited interaction it's going to have with every play on the game. It's a very rare. Here in Toronto, we've seen it used once in Toronto FC games, and that was.
What did you think of that call? It was the Darwin Sarin was late coming in on.
Late on Marky Delgado.
Okay, yeah.
It's one of those ones where when it happens in a split second and the referee sees it, if it's a game that hasn't seen a lot of nastiness, I'm fine with it being a yellow. If it's a game where the guys have been really scrappy and they've been going at each other and they've had a couple of warnings and you feel like it was a little bit of retribution, then I can see it being a red.
I think what the referee saw was the spike going into his spikes going into Marky's shin. I think that's what did it. It wasn't the power of it.
It was very high, and it was pretty late. And I think the two of them had been jawing at each other a little bit a couple minutes earlier. And so, it was right at the end of the match. The game was clearly over. There was no need for Seren to go
Yeah.
into that, and I think that played a pretty big role.
So I think they get that right. I think that call right. We've seen some other ones that are strange. Kaká getting sent off for tapping someone on the face, which
for
is
expressing his
love.
feelings for his former team.
So that one was strange. And then the other one I wanted to bring up was I thought I'm not sure if you had time to watch this game, but Atlanta versus Dallas. Atlanta actually has a goal call or a penalty in favor of them called off because there was an offside before the penalty was called, and they actually showed the replay on TV, and it wasn't clear and obvious that the player was offside. And it was a bit strange. It wasn't like that definition of clear and obvious is troublesome sometimes if you put that in the hands of one person.
Yeah, I think what this is going to expose in general, what the whole video review thing is going to expose in general, is there's an awful lot of gray area contained within the laws that govern the game. You know, clear and obvious. What does that mean? It's very much open to interpretation exactly what that means. And then for that offside one, it sort of goes, how far back on a play do you go? When does a passage of play really start? Does a turnover here lead to this play 30 seconds later? That's what's really going to be the nitty-gritty of how this plays out and how it affects the game.
But we've seen it. We've had it for a month now, and I don't think there hasn't been too much bad to say about it.
No, except for the Kaká one, which was...
Well, Orlando's better without him anyway. like Orlando's getting to the point now where they're like almost like applauding whenever like this guy's not.
So
not
Price will
involved.
go up to the boards and be like, "Here, Kaká, go rub somebody's face and get yourself."
Yeah, exactly. Let's just get to the last topic here. We're out of time. Going back to the LA game, what are we thinking for that? I mean, what are we watching for? It's part of me is like, you just want to see if TFC can stay on the streak they're on. The other part of me is, okay, let's test the depth again, because we've been talking about it all the time. TFC's front office has been, bragging about their depth basically for a long time now. So we're going to go and we're going to see if they can win without their two, best attacking players.
Well, I don't know if they could have a better match to follow on the heels of missing these guys. I mean, going to play LA in LA used to be one of the hardest fixtures in this league, and this year it has just been. It's been almost hard to watch how much they've fallen at home.
Now they got Ziggy.
Yeah, Ziggy and Dom. Isn't Dom there too?
Well, who do you want to see start out there? Who do you want to see get a start and why? We're talking about maybe a Ben Spencer.
Yeah, I've been watching a lot of TFC2 this year, and Greg has said before that he wants to use that to get guys minutes, and I think there are a couple of players that have earned themselves some minutes. I think you have to look at Jordan Hamilton and not just what he's done in the few minutes that he has with the first team, but what he's accomplished down there. I think it's been like 8 or 9 games, and he's got 5 or 6 goals, and this is for a team that's really struggled to score goals this year. Alongside him, I think Tsubasa Endo has been fantastic down there. He's been driving games. Teams have to game plan for him down at TFC2, and it's evident that when he's on form, he can orchestrate in a way that we haven't seen many TFC players do over the years.
But then when he gets to that next level, the question I think becomes, and I've been saying this all season and some of last season, the question becomes, where does he play at the MLS level?
Yeah,
and how does he fit into TFC's depth chart right now?
Well, we saw him early in the year at that right wing back, and it exposed his inability. He's not a defensive player. It was something that they wanted to try out and see if he could add it to his game, and since that was clearly not good, they brought him inside as more of a, not quite the attacking midfielder role, but one of the forward two. So TFC2, they play the 3-5-2 down there, and they have one holding midfielder and 2 sort of more forward ones. And Tsubasa's been on the right, and it means that almost every attack sort of goes through him. He links up with the attacking right wing back. He links up with the 2 strikers, and he even has attempts from goal on himself. And he nearly scored one on the weekend against New York. So he's been lively.
I wonder if they were struggling to find out if they wanted to keep him going forward. I wonder if they were struggling. Okay, where does this guy fit in?
I think that's a problem for every young player at the team.
And I mean, the good thing for Endo, if you're looking forward the next year, is maybe a spot opens up if Armando Cooper moves on. Maybe there's something there for him. But I still think his best position is in a 4-3-3 as like a right striker where he can kind of be out wide, get balls into the box. The problem with that, and the reason why he's not making game day rosters right now is because that's essentially what they have Ricketts on the bench for, to bring in off the bench to do more. Jordan Hamilton, you want to talk a little about it? I mean, are we looking for him to get a start?
Yes, basically yes. I would assume. Well, I don't know. Ben Spencer scored his first goal. He's been looking a lot sharper recently too. So Greg will really have the choice on his hands of whether he wants Ben, who's a little bit more of a physical hold up back to goal guy, and Jordan's a little bit more rangy darting sort of forward. So given that, I don't think Ben and Ricketts have played any minutes together whatsoever. I wouldn't be surprised if Greg went with Jordan and to Saint just because they have that extra little bit of familiarity, and then maybe Ben comes on a little bit later and gets some minutes.
Do you think they push Victor Vasquez for the first half, 60 minutes, full game? I mean, we know Michael Browley's going to play; he's a mainstay, and that's what I mean.
I don't think Michael would let you take him off.
No, but I also people think that it's a bad thing, and I don't agree with that. People are like, well, they shouldn't travel Michael, they shouldn't travel Victor. Some players, and this was my experience, some players need to be on the field because they feel like if they miss a week, if they miss 10 days, they're out of form. They lose what they've built up.
Well, and the other thing though is that these guys
need to travel. Like Michael Browley needs to travel.
He needs to travel, but he's such a part of this team in many ways that have nothing to do with on the field that I think they would suffer if he wasn't with them, regardless of whether he was playing or not.
All right, so I need a prediction on the LA game. I'm gonna put you on the spot right here. I'll give you mine too.
Let's go with a 2-0 TFC.
I'm gonna go with a 2-1 loss.
2-1 loss.
I think it's going to be 2. I don't think they're going to be able to get. I mean, listen. I know you're going to LA, but this is going to be the week where somebody finally catches them because they're missing 2 of their best players.
No, see, I'm looking at New England for that one because that's a tricky trip.
Wow, yeah, that's right. But they owe New England something for that last game because the last game they played at Foxborough was they got embarrassed.
Yeah, that was.
They're missing key players.
It was their worst game of the season.
It was the worst game of the season. All right, we're going to get out of here. The Kurt Larson podcast. James Grossi, thanks for being on. You can follow his work at MLSsoccer.com. and my work here at the Toronto Sun. See you next time.